Good day, friends. In today's video, I'll discuss Pakistan's exceptional constitutional amendment bill, which has proposed sweeping powers for the army chief. This, I believe, will be detrimental to Pakistan military's recently demonstrated credible deterrence, which is also the basis of Pakistan's risen geopolitical profile. And since Operation Sindoor is on pause, this bill runs the risk of a hot war between India and Pakistan with consequences for the region and the world. So it's a serious matter. Bill needs to be considered seriously. While the bill has many things it talks about, it's about military matters, it is about judiciary, center-state relations. I am focusing only on the military matters because that is at the heart of this bill. And the changes that it has proposed in the military, they have been listed in the Dawn newspaper. I have picked up three of those changes and I'll look at them. The first change is that the army chief will concurrently be the chief of defense forces. Now, what this means is that in the pack of three, where there are three chiefs of the three services, all four-star officers, constitutionally the leader of this pack will be the army chief. In other words, what this means is that while the three chiefs can have discussion on critical matters, it is the boss who will prevail. Constitutionally, he can do that. Now, the second point or the second big change is that the four-star officer, the post of the chairman, joint chiefs of staff, is to be done away with. It will be abolished when the present incumbent, General Mirza, he relinquishes office on 27th of November. Now, when the post is not there, then his headquarters, which is joint staff headquarters, is also unnecessary. In other words, today the joint staff headquarters has under it two very important organizations which will become headless. One organization is the Strategic Plans Division, which is responsible for Pakistan's nuclear weapons, and the second is the three strategic commands of the three services which have under them the strategic assets which support the nuclear weapons. So they'll become headless. Another thing that will happen is it will impact on the National Command Authority, the highest body in Pakistan which looks at defense and security, headed by the Prime Minister. What will happen is that the key military representative in the National Command Authority right now is the chairman, joint chiefs of staff. And once he's not there, then it becomes very obvious that it is the army chief who at present is one of the members of the three services. And given his risen profile constitutionally, he will become not only the key military representative in the National Command Authority, but he is likely to overshadow or sidestep the Prime Minister in decision making at the National Command Authority. And this organization or authority looks at issues of war and peace, and specifically it looks at the use of nuclear weapons if and when it is to be done. Now, the third big change is the creation of a new organization called National Strategic Command, which will be headed by a commander who will be appointed by the Prime Minister on the recommendation of the Army Chief. In my assessment, those two headless organizations will come here under the National Strategic Command, with this commander overseeing this command, which has been appointed by the army chief, because through this, in this way, and I will explain this a little more a little later, this way the army chief will retain total command and control of Pakistan's nuclear weapon and strategic assets. Now, when we look at these three big changes, it tells us that the army chief in Pakistan, once the bill is passed, he will decide matters of conventional warfare, all aspects of it. He will be the last word. Then it is the Pakistan Army Chief who will be the sole custodian or the big person who will decide command and control of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. And he, as the prevailing authority in the National Command Authority, will decide issues of war and peace, obviously more with India, and will also decide if and when Pakistan's nuclear weapons are to be used. Now, in any democracy, this is a scary scenario where you have one single person, army chief, deciding so many things concerning war and peace, and especially for Pakistan, since it has two fronts and both are tense. And here is the point that I want to make. This bill and what it has proposed, unlimited powers for the army chief, is actually not in sync at all with the verdict of the 4-day operation, which happened in May, which India called Sindoor and Pakistan called Operation Bunyan-un-Marsoos. Now, that verdict of this operation of Pakistan is entirely different. It does not talk at all about the requirement of army chief being given unlimited powers, and let me explain this. The key verdict of this 4-day operation was that the international community assessed Pakistan military to be a peer competitor of the Indian military. And the reason why they came to this conclusion was the performance of the Pakistan Air Force in the air to air operations, which were done on the first night of the 4-day operation. So, what they did, the world has been told, and the world was told the next day. That means on the May 8th, there was a briefing that was held for the international media by the DG ISPR, who is a 3-star army officer, to explain what was done by the Pakistan Air Force. And the lead or the presentation was made by the 2-star Air Vice Marshal Aurangzeb, because he was the best person to have explained what the Pakistan Air Force did, to explain what their new concept of multi-domain operation is all about, which is operating at the operational level of war, and to take on the questions of the international community with replies that satisfied them. So the point to make here is that in this briefing, which was as important as what the Pakistan Air Force actually did, it was the 2-star Air Force officer and not the 3-star Army officer who was the lead in the briefing. And the reason was that Army and the Air Force, and this is relevant to the Indian military also, they have their core competencies. When they have similar doctrines and they do coordinated operations, so they have different core competencies. And the core competency of a service, it depends on its force levels. For example, as far as the army is concerned, now we are talking of Pakistan Army, its force levels are structured around manpower. So it's about manpower, more people, it is less about technology, which is not the case with the Air Force and the Navy. Their force levels are structured around platforms and technologies, and as more and more technologies come in warfare, these are the people of these two services, the Air Force and the Navy, who get to understand and to get the technology in their service faster than the Army. Because of this basic thing, which is the core competencies are different. Now, and this is, of course, also the reason why when in Pakistan they set up the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Computing, it a very technical thing, technology intensive. So it was under the Pakistan Air Force and not the Pakistan Army. So once we understand this basic thing, here is my point. And the point is, it is not unusual in the Pakistan Army to have the chief by deep selection. So a situation can come, which is very much possible, that there is a army chief who is junior in seniority to the Air Force chief, who understands much less of technology than the Air Force chief understands, but it is the army chief who constitutionally will have the last word on deterrence and last word on conventional war. And this is the reason, if this is considered seriously, one would definitely conclude that it does not really help Pakistan military's deterrence. Now, if I take this argument further, You see the Pakistan Navy. Pakistan Navy, we know by 2028 it is to get 8 Hangur submarines from China. And these submarines will have the AIP, which is Air Independent Propulsion, and the role of the Pakistan Navy is expanding. And I have done a video on this earlier to say that along with plan, which is there uh, in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa, the Pakistan Navy will be playing an important role in the stabilization of the Western Indian Ocean region. So, my second point on this is that as more and more technology comes and as the operational level of war evolves, we have to look at the cutting edge military, which has today the operational level of war, which is at the cutting edge. And this is applicable both to the Pakistan military as well as the Indian military, what I'm saying. And that is the PLA. Now, PLA did its 2014, it gave out its military strategy based on which it did the 2015 structural reforms. And as part of that, the army or the land forces, they were cut drastically. And the money and the technology went into the rocket force, it went into PLAF, Air Force, and Navy. So we have to keep this in mind. When you consider this, it becomes very clear that status quo will be best for the Pakistan military's deterrence, where all the three services have the say and they do coordinated operations. Now I come to the nuclear aspect. Now, as far as this is concerned, a bit of a background becomes important. Now, this chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, when this post was created and the office was created, Joint Staff Headquarters in 1976, the understanding was that the chairman will be in rotation from the services. Army, Air Force, Navy. This continued for a while, and after that, the Pakistan Army decided to discontinue that, and the chairman since then has been from the Pakistan Army. Now, the problem here is that the chairman is appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. So, the army chief does not have a direct say in this. Now, this is obviously not, I'll give you the reason why, but this is perhaps not acceptable to the present army chief who wants to control the appointment of the chairman or the commander of this important organization where the nuclear weapons are there. And therefore, in my assessment, what I said, those two organizations, now they have come under the National Strategic Command, which is under a commander, which in my reckoning would be a 3-star officer and not a 4-star officer, like the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. And this officer will be directly under the army chief. So now the point is, for the army, the Pakistan army, nuclear weapons were not really about war fighting at all. So they kept the nuclear weapons, the SPD, under the 4-star army officer, which is the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. They kept it under him. So what has happened now that the army chief wants it under his direct control? And I think the answer is to be found in what President Trump has been saying for quite some time. President Trump, who has given a strategic role to Pakistan, has repeatedly said that he's the one who brought peace between India and Pakistan. He got the ceasefire in that 4-day operation and he stopped a nuclear war. He's repeatedly spoken about stopping a nuclear war. I think this is what has spurred Asim Munir to now seriously consider that yes, while the nuclear weapons have no role in war fighting with India, they are important for the risen profile of Pakistan geopolitical profile, and therefore they should now be directly under the Pakistan Army Chief. And in my assessment, this is the reason why all these changes have been made and why the Joint Staff Headquarters has been done away with and the National Strategic Command has been created. But this is for the Pakistan military to decide. Now, here is my key point that I want to, why I made this video. My reason is that when you give so much of power to a single person, and given the state of India-Pakistan relations, We know they are not normal. We know that Pakistan regularly accuses India of meddling in Baluchistan, bringing their instability by supporting the BLA, and that India is behind the support of TTP in Afghanistan against Pakistan. And on the Indian side, it is regularly said that it is the Pakistan army and the army chief who's behind the proxy war that is going on in Jammu and Kashmir. So, given the state of the situation that exists today between India and Pakistan, in my assessment, uh, it is a very dangerous proposition that there be one single person in Pakistan who can roughshod the National Command Authority and take decisions on about war and peace. One single person with minimal checks and balances on him. So my point is that it does not help the Pakistan's deterrence, and it brings India and Pakistan closer to a hot war, which does not help the region, which does not help the development of the two countries and the region. Now, in my opinion, the only people who can get a sincere or a sensible review of this bill, which I said is very contrary to the verdict of the 4-day operation, are the 9 corps commanders. Because the Pakistan Army Chief draws strength or the power from his 9 corps commanders, so it is up to them to see what is best for their country and best for the military. Thank you so much.